It's up to you, Alan.
Up to me.
You.
Just say yes.
Yes.
We are
No, I
live.
had to go to Queens to pick up my daughters.
Okay, that's our goal. All right, thank you. All right, I'll call the meeting of the July 1st, 2020 Land Use and Building Management Committee meeting to order. It is now, I think, 7:30, 7:31. I'll start with roll call. Mr. Hildeman,
Here.
Ms. Smith,
Here.
Mr. Roberts,
Present.
Mr. Keegan.
Here.
Pacinelli,
Present.
Mr. Burnett,
Present.
and I'm here, Tom Livingston. We have a quorum, or actually it's unanimous, so we're all here. Okay, next item on the agenda is public participation. Is there anyone on the call who wants to speak? Larry?
Yes, we do have one person with their hand up, Diane Laricella.
Okay,
Diane, you're free to speak.
all right, Diane, welcome.
Good evening, everyone. I was not going to speak, but it's just a very interesting agenda. A lot of hard work has been done. So I have briefly several items that I just had a question, and I would like those questions answered either at this meeting or shortly thereafter to me in an email, or you can call me. The first thing, it has to do with the sublease on 334 Wilson Avenue. I tangled on this with Bruce Kimmel and Tom when we first had the 5-year lease to First Student. And because there have been decisions made to switch, there may be a decision made tonight to switch the vendor, I wanted to ask Tom if he could find out, or even the attorney on the call from our corporation counsel, as to whether—
Diane, actually, there are 3 Toms in this call.
Oh, Tom Hamilton.
Go ahead.
If First Student has to do any kind of environmental assessment, even a modified phase 1, so that our city, they are the sublease, so that our city knows that they, with their gas-powered school buses, has not contaminated the site. There needs to be some kind of due diligence to prove that the city's not responsible, especially because that site drains to Village Creek. And the second item I'm interested in is item 2A, Roten Middle School. I wanted to ask Mr. Hodel is what other measures will be employed at Roten Middle School in order to reduce the need for air conditioning. In other words, to reduce the temperature, the ambient temperature in the building, so that you won't need to use as much air conditioning and electricity to do so. I'll give you a hint. There are answers to that. The first is having a white roof so that it reflects off of the heat and the hot weather. Another is for the outer windows, which have already gotten air conditioning, to use shades when it is sunny on their side of the school, because that will cool down the inner core. So I would like an answer to that. What other measures besides the needed air conditioning and electric upgrades is the school system employing for this school? Third, oil tanks. You're going to be voting tonight on design services to remove tanks. I would like to know which schools have the oil tanks that have been determined to have achieved their 30-year useful life. Number one, which schools? It hasn't been easy for me with COVID to go in and find out exactly which schools have this. I would like to know. Number two, I'd like to know which schools still have underground fuel tanks that are, and what is the age of those tanks, so we can appropriately advance removing them before their 30-year life. The reason why I'm mentioning this and I'll be done in 30 seconds, is because the cost of soil contamination and all of the work related to removing oil tanks in the ground, if they are leaking or were leaking, goes up astronomically from year to year. And the thing is, as I said before in a capital budget, in a budget meeting, that these should have been removed in sequence, a few at a time, for the last 5 to 10 years of the useful life. And we also should make sure, when possible, for the replacement oil tanks, if they are going to be replaced, that they're not in the ground. The underground storage tank laws went into effect in the early 80s when I worked at the Department of Environmental Protection. On occasion, I was borrowed to help them with assessing oil tanks. So I feel that the management of this oil tank issue appears to be approaching something that could be considered wasteful because of the threat of the ticking time bomb of an underground oil tank, especially those that are large enough, like you would see in a school. And I have mentioned this before over the years. Even the oil tank at West Rocks, which is indoors, but it leaked into a floor drain and caused a lot of money damage to a condo unit, Sunrise, nearby, into their pond. So that is it. I would like answers to all these things. I'd like to know again which schools are scheduled to have their tanks removed for this round, and which ones, what is the age of any remaining oil tanks, because they all should be removed sooner rather than later in order to save taxpayer money and to help the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else on the line who wants to speak?
No, there is not.
Mr. Matera, are you raising your hand or? You're on mute.
I apologize. I had nothing. No comment.
Okay. All right. So there'll be no, and Alan, you don't have any letters or anything? That's a no. All right, I'll now close public participation and move to approval of the minutes of May 6th, 2020. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Mr. Hildeman. Are there any comments or changes on the minutes? I actually do have one myself, but I seem to have lost it. So,
Mr. Chairman, this is Bill Hodell. Can I make a comment on the minutes or at another time? I just want to make a correction.
sure. I'm just trying to find. I've lost mine. Lost the agenda. Anybody else have any, Brian? I mean, what am I saying? Bill, why don't you make yours while I find this?
Okay, I'm sorry. So on page 5, under Board of Education B, item 1, the last paragraph, Mr. Barnett asked about the electric and hybrid cars. At the end of that sentence, there's the word of hybrid cars, and then it's also talks about hybrid trucks. I asked that the word hybrid be replaced to electric because that's what the discussion was about.
Okay, noted. And my change, now that I have this, is, I apologize. This is on page,
It's on page 5.
yeah, that's yours. I'm looking at the, it's the item
So
on
it
the purchase. Okay, so it's on page 5, and it's under the on the vehicle purchase, and it's 3 lines down under Miss Smith moved the item. It says the former superintendent has requested. He's former now, but he wasn't former then, so delete the word former. And are there any other comments or changes in these minutes? Hearing none, I'll just ask for vote in favor of them. David? Huebelman?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Aye.
Mr. Keegan?
Yes.
Mr. Burnett?
Aye.
Mr. Sacchinelli?
Aye.
And I also approve, so it's unanimous. Okay, so move to the next set of minutes from the meeting of June 3rd, 2020. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Dean, is that you? Okay, thank you. Any comments, changes, revisions on these? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Mr. Huberman,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts? Dean? Mr. Roberts? You're frozen, I guess.
Aye.
Okay, Mr. Keegan,
Yes.
Mr. Burnett,
Aye.
Mr. Sacchinelli?
Aye.
And I also approve, so it's unanimous. Okay, so moving on to the first item on the agenda. Sorry, guys, I'm going back and forth between screens here.
Larry, can we put up the agenda?
No, I got it now.
You got it?
New business is this item 4A, the city property review request from Mr. Gino Matera to purchase city property located on the corner of West Cedar and Scribner Avenue. Suggested action, schedule public hearing. Alan, you want to address that?
Excuse me.
Yeah,
Do we have the agenda to show up on the screen? Because I don't have access to it.
No, well, let me do it then. I think I can do it. Do I have the ability to do this?
Larry?
Oh, there you go.
Thank you.
All right, Alan, you can talk about this? We discussed this at prior meetings, but Alan has done a little research. Whoever's having the party, if they can mute it. Alan,
Can you hear me?
now we can.
Okay, very good. Last month, this item came up as a request of Ms. Matera for regarding the possible sale of the city property at the corner, intersection of Scribner and West Cedar. So on this package, on the backup package, last month, we did not have a survey map. Now we do. So if you look at the third page of the backup, it shows the intersection. And what it shows his property, which is on the upper right-hand corner. And there's another property below him. And then the city property is right at the intersection, which is triangular shape. And also we learned that there is a sanitary sewer that go through the property. So if for some reason we do sell, not for some reason, in the event that we decide to sell the property, we need to reserve an easement over that area. So what it does is really limit the ability to build anything on that property. And also, if you look at the upper corner on the survey map, what happened on West Cedar Street, there's a strip of property along the edge of his property that we do not have sidewalk, which what happened is that if we ever want to do this, maintain a proper right of way for the street, there's a good possibility we have to acquire that portion of property from Mr. Terra. So there is some relationship in terms of something we need from him and something that he needs from us. Since last month's meeting, I sent a letter to pretty much all the department heads, and I got out of probably like 15 people, I got probably like 4 response back, and none of them was all of them was support. There's no comment, generally speaking. They responded that there are no issues. And I assume that all the other departments that did not respond, they do not have the issue. That's why they did not respond. So generally speaking, one of the first steps we did is notify department heads. We did, and there's no issue from departments. Then I met with director of zoning and director of purchasing regarding the process and whether the property is buildable. And to the extent that we can look at this property, it's size-wise, we think technically, I think it's buildable, but realistically, it's very hard because the need for the easement or the sewer. If somebody really want to build a property, they have to relocate the sewer, and they add so much cost because they got to relocate it to the street, but then the pitch on the sewer line may not work. So it's realistically, there's limited ability to develop this piece of property. If somebody could, there's high possibility if it tied to the adjacent property owner, the property line would change. there's a greater possibility someone will use part of it. Otherwise, it's a very limited ability, financial as well as configuration to build on this property. So there's still further discussion. Me and Steve from P&Z and from Sharon to look at the process because it gets a little complicated. One of the reasons is that we are looking for something from Mr. Matera's property, and so we don't know whether we're not sure we have to advertise and sell this property. It could be negotiated, but there's something that Sharon and Darren Callahan actually is online today. We need to sit down and talk about how best to, in terms of process, how best we can make this work or to meet all the legal and public requirements. But meanwhile, for tonight's meeting, if the committee would take on the suggestion that we can schedule a public hearing for next month, so that we can just on the possible sale of the property, the method of the method that we go for the selling process, it does not have to, it's not a public hearing issue. It's really just whether the city and the public are interested to selling this property. So how we do it, we will work it out administratively.
So you'd have answers by then? In terms of
I will, because because it get complicated, because if it's not buildable, it's possible that we can approach both adjacent property owners. So there's no public advertising required because no use for anybody else. So there's no need for advertising. But there's something that me, Sharon Connors, and Darren Callahan, we need to sit down and figure what's reasonable and to do. Because advertising does not solve some of the issue. I don't want to go into it now, but it creates its own sets of concerns. So I want to leave it at that.
Okay, Mr. Matera, I mean, assuming we move forward, you're aware of these restrictions that Mr. Lowe is mentioning, right? I mean, I wouldn't hate to go through the process and you find out, well, no, that's not going to work for you.
Yeah, I am aware of those restrictions.
Yeah. Any discussion? Hearing none, do I have a motion?
I just have one question for Alan. This is David Huvelman. Are we able to put a real sidewalk in there as part of this, or is that even something to discuss?
The comments I got from DPW, they intend to do that sometime in the future, not near future, but you know, there's a sidewalk there now. They want somehow they want I mean, housing authority is across the street. I think having a sidewalk along this way, it's desirable to have it. So they again, it's not something they need tomorrow, but you know what, since we're working on this property sell/exchange kind of thing, then it's proper, I guess, desirable to have that worked out now instead of trying to condemn the property later or acquire and deal with another process. So it's simply just to do it all together at one time if with the city's intent would be interested in selling our property.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, do I have a motion to send this to public hearing?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Hooverman. I guess I'll call for a roll call vote. Well, I'm looking at who's in front of me on the screen. Mr. Hooverman?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Burnett?
Aye.
Mr. Roberts?
Aye.
Mr. Keegan?
Yes.
Mr. Sacchinelli?
Aye.
And I as well. So I believe I got everybody, so it's unanimous. So we'll have move to public hearing next month. Thank you, Mr. Matera.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to the Norwalk Public Schools. Is this the proper resolution here, Alan? I know there's some amendments. I'm looking what's on the screen now.
Wait, I'm sorry. Oh, this is okay. Yeah, that's not the proper.
Okay, I have it here then. Let me.
You have it then. You're right.
I'll read the revised resolution. Everybody got the supplemental package. It's authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to enter into a contract with the Norwalk Board of Education and Durham Student Services LP to sublease 334 Wilson Avenue, Norwalk, Connecticut for a term coterminous with the agreement for type 1 and type 2 student transportation services by and between the Norwalk Board of Education and Durham School Services LP dated May 18, 2020, which absent extension ends on June 30, 2025. There a motion? Anyone?
I'll move it.
Thanks, Ms. Smith. Who's going to talk to this? Darren, Tom?
Yeah, this is Tom Hamilton. I'll start and I'll let Darren jump in a moment. Just to provide you with some background information. I know that hopefully you did all receive the memo that I prepared and sent it out to Alan. I think he forwarded it on. So just to refresh people's memory, if you were on the council back a number of years ago, you remember in 2017, the Norwalk Public Schools and the city of Norwalk entered into a long-term lease for the current school bus property. And the reason we pursued that was because of the fact that previously the Board of Education's transportation contract required the bidder to secure their own site. And there are really a very limited number of sites where you can store that many school buses in the city of Norwalk. And so that was really a major impediment to fostering competition in the transportation bid. And the transportation contract is one of the school district's largest contracts outside of our labor contracts. It's one of the largest non-labor contracts that we have. So we felt it would be advisable, as actually this effort began when I was still working for the city back in 2015. The lease was not concluded until 2017, but we felt it was advisable to put the city and the school district in a better position relative to fostering more competition on that transportation contract. It so happened that because we entered into a longer term lease with the property owner, we also realized a very substantial savings in the lease payment itself, because the lease payment previously was a pass-through expense that came to the Board of Education from the transportation provider. So we were able to substantially reduce our annual lease expense for the site. So at this point, fast forward to 2019-20, our transportation contract was coming up for rebidding. We went out to bid in December. There was very strong interest among, I think we had 5 proposers, and 2 of the proposers actually proposed pricing that was below our current year pricing, or below our 2018 or 19-20 pricing. In fact, Durham School Services proposed pricing that was 7% below last year's rate. So there's substantial savings as a result of switching transportation providers. So the Board of Education, our board, has approved the new transportation contract, and we are at the final stages really of getting all of the documents aligned and in place. The city, because this is involves real property, and because it involves a contract that exceeds a 5-year term, the city is required under the Norwalk Code to be a party to this agreement, a party to both the underlying lease and a party to the sublease between the district, the city, and the transportation provider. So because we're changing transportation providers, we need a new sublease because there's a new party now involved in this transaction, namely Durham. So Darren Callahan in the law department has been extremely helpful to the public schools throughout this process. We thank him for all the work that I know he has put into this. And I'm going to ask him to sort of chime in just a moment. I did want to start to address the question that was raised by Ms. Lauricella. I think that really is more of a legal question than a finance question, so I think I would leave that to Darren. Other than to say, since I was involved in the original discussion or original negotiations over the lease and the sublease, that the issue of environmental considerations was taken very seriously by the law department at the time that was negotiating this contract on behalf of the city and the Board of Education. And in fact, the law department brought in a special environmental counsel at that time to, draft contract language that would afford the best protection possible to the city and the school district. So I'm gonna, I guess stop here and turn it over to Darren, and maybe he can fill in a little bit more on some of the legal aspects that you might have questions on.
Aaron?
Yes, good evening, everyone. I'm happy to start anywhere anyone would like me to.
Well, maybe you can address Ms. Lauricella's question to the extent you can.
Yeah, so this issue of who's responsible for what on the environmental issue, as Tom indicated, was dealt with quite extensively, and it was memorialized as Article 8 in the master lease between 332 Wilson Avenue LLC and the tenants being Board of Education and City of Norwalk. And we looked at that quite closely, given that there was going to be a change in bus operators, and determined that effectively it was that it's the landlord's obligation to conduct additional testing if it wants to assert that there's been a change from the baseline tests that were initially conducted, and which resulted in any additional hazardous environmental conditions on the property. So at the time we took this property, we leased it. It was already a Transfer Act property, or a property considered an establishment of the Transfer Act. And the lease effectively created a presumption that any contamination on the property or hazardous conditions, environmental conditions on the property, predated the commencement date of the lease, for which the tenant, the Board of Ed and the city are not responsible for, and that it really placed the burden on the landlord to subsequently do testing to establish that additional environmental conditions above and beyond what existed at the time of the baseline tests exist, at which point that would be the responsibility of the city as the tenant.
Well, so Darren, let me ask you, just to be clear. So we now have a new company coming in. So did we do something, some sort of due diligence to see that what the old company may have left? I mean, are they responsible for? I mean, how do you sort of set the baseline, reset the baseline?
It's the way the lease is set up, Tom. It's Councilman Livingston. It's really set up for them to do the testing. If we really want to do it, we could ask them to do it. I think as a practical matter, the tanks, the USTs, reached the end of the useful life about a year ago, and the landlord's operating under an extension, a deep extension, and I believe they're required to be removed by yesterday. I got to look into the status of that. But ultimately, if they're removing the tanks, which are located under the pump station where all the fueling is done, we're gonna know what the situation is vis-a-vis the environmental conditions just by virtue of the tank removal.
Okay. Other questions, discussion?
If I could just add, and I had mentioned this in the memo that I sent, but did want to point out that one of the changes that the school district was very pleased that we're able to implement with this new bus contract is to move to a propane fueled fleet. So that is another change that will also be happening. And that has a number of advantages. As Darren indicated, the landlord is removing the underground storage tanks, the diesel storage tanks, and we will be putting in an above ground propane tank. And it's a much cleaner fuel. The reason that the district was interested in doing this is to reduce the health hazards associated with the particulate emissions from 70 diesel fuel buses riding around town all year. And so we think that that's another great advantage really to this change. So we will be moving to a much cleaner alternative fueled vehicle as well.
Yeah, I think that's great. Any further discussion?
Sorry, just so I'm clear, this is David Huvelman. Darren, so the Norwalk Public School District nor the city will be encumbered for any cleanup that may result when they pull those tanks. Is that correct? Or it's all on the landlord, or we could be liable for some of that if there was leaching or any issues?
At this point, there's no reason to believe that the city would have any liability or exposure to that end. The lease basically, as I read it, again, it's very dense on this issue because it is considered an establishment under the Transfer Act. There's about 6 pages dedicated. It's about the longest set of environmental clauses I've ever seen in a commercial lease. And and it's very complicated the way it's addressed, but effectively everyone recognizes that environmental condition existed on the property, that wasn't the responsibility of the city. A baseline test was conducted to determine what those environmental conditions were, what the extent that they were, and that there's a presumption that any conditions on the site were pre-existing conditions existing prior to the commencement of the date of the lease, unless, and this is in,
Darren, while you're looking, I mean, we've had a bus company on the site for a couple of years now, presumably dripping oil or whatever that might happen. How do we know that we're not going to get saddled with anything there?
Well, so the way the lease operates is it's only it's the landlord's liability unless there's an exacerbation of the condition that existed upon the commencement date.
Well, that's what this would be. I mean, if a bus has been run after it's been turned over to the Board of Education and buses are driving around, that's an exacerbation of the situation, I think.
That liability would fall to the bus contractor, the sublease, correct, Darren?
Yes.
If there were an exacerbation.
First student, and the only situation that arises is if there was a documented release of hazardous materials during the lease term, which I'm not aware of any, or there was a new baseline test done that established that there was an exacerbation. We put the landlord on notice that we intended to bring in a new bus operator. It was our view that that was the mechanism by which they should go and conduct a baseline test, but they didn't. I'm not sure that we have the right under the lease to conduct a baseline test ourselves.
Well,
But
actually, because of timing, I'd like to move this to the council, but I'd also like, Darren, if you could, to take a little look in the documents and just see and let us know whether there is any potential liability for us here before the council meeting.
Absolutely.
I know the timing's important here for the district. But it's not clear to me from what I'm hearing that we're off the hook.
It seems, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, Darren, there was a baseline test done when we took possession of the property. So
Mhm.
if they're tearing the tanks out, there needs to be another test at some point so that we can say we're at that level. Because if we're above that level, it would seem to me that somewhere somebody's going to be liable for that, whether it passes through the first student or it stays with the city. Somebody is going to have to be encumbered for that cleanup through the EPA process if it has to happen.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that. And I apologize. I didn't realize this was going to be an issue that was going to come up. And I'm just working from memory off of reading this provision a few months ago. So I'm at a little bit of a deficit to get into the granular aspects of how the lease operates regarding this particular issue, because it is so dense. But I'm happy to look at it. I can tell you that we look very closely at it.
Okay, so why don't you do that before the council meeting, and you and I can talk about how best to let the council know.
Sure. Tom, could I just add a couple really quick? I think we need to differentiate a few things. The first one is that the tank, I don't know the detail of this relationship, but the way I'm hearing is that the tank is the responsibility of the property owner. So when it's tested, is the property owner responsibility. So contamination fall on the property owner. But there's another piece, it's like somebody said before, it's like if the vehicles on the property leak oil or whatever kind of thing, it's two different issues, right? One is operating issue, the other one is like tank that belongs to the property owner that potentially may have leak or not leak. The third thing is, the good thing is that the council not meeting next week, so it's another week. So there is some time for opportunity for Darren to provide us with additional information.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So absent any objection, I'd like to move this forward with that caveat. All right, so unless there's any discussion, we'll call for a vote. Mr. Hooverman?
A question.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Greg.
What is the, I'm trying to understand, what is the sensitivity of timing here? Why are we moving this forward with these unanswered questions about the tanks and the environment? What is the timeline we're up against that we can't have this come back to committee in July?
Well, the issue here is that the bus contract for the Board of Ed ended with first student ended on June 30th, yesterday. And the way the bidding process worked, we had a very tight timeline for getting a contract in place with a new bus contractor, and they in a sublease, and they needed to be in there by July 1st. So my understanding is they're in there today. And
You got to run for summer school?
yes, for summer school. And we have an obligation under our lease to provide a sublease to the landlord. They've already asked for it. So somewhere along the way, and again, this is a little more complicated than normally would be, because the lease is between not just the Board of Education, but the city as well, but it's really an operational contract of the board. So somewhere along the way, it was lost in the process. The approval on the city side was necessary for the sublease. Typically, when it gets to us, all the approval is already in place, and that's when we pick up pencil and start to work. But this was a little bit of a different lift here because of the timeline. And so we were involved much earlier than we normally would have been in the process. So pre-approval, we were attempting to address all the contractual issues, all the transactional issues to meet what was a very aggressive timeline.
So is the landlord going to be removing these tanks while we're in full operations with Durham, correct?
They're under an order from the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection to remove the tanks. I believe they were under an extension of that, and it was supposed to be done. It's either being done now or it's supposed to be done by now. But it is the obligation of the landlord to remove the tanks. Yes.
So are we in default in some way if we're living there month to month before DEP gets in and tests and we get the results of these tests before we fully execute this lease?
I'm not sure that the subleasing and the environmental issues are really connected issues. You know, in order for us to have a new tenant in there, our obligations under the lease are that we execute a new sublease. With respect to liability for environmental conditions on the property, I really view that as a separate issue, and I can certainly evaluate what our potential liability is that would occur as a result of one bus operator vacating the premises and a new bus operator taking possession of the premises. But that being said, we would still most likely need to approach the landlord and request permission to conduct that testing, because I don't see anywhere in the lease where we have the right to conduct environmental testing to even establish a second baseline.
Well, I don't want to take too much more time here unless there's specific questions. If you can look at it, obviously it's less than ideal situation in terms of timing. That's why I was trying to see if we can accommodate it with the caveat again that we get a satisfactory response. Darren looks into this.
I'm absolutely more than pleased to provide an answer on that, and I apologize that I don't have a complete answer at the moment.
Okay, any further discussion on this item? Okay, I'll call for a vote. Mr. Hooverman,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Keegan,
Yes.
Mr. Burnett,
Nay.
Mr. Roberts,
Aye.
Mr. Sacchinelli,
Aye.
and I vote yes, so that's 6 in favor, 1 opposed. All right, thank you. Next item B2, review bids for the Rhoton Middle School portable air conditioning and electrical upgrades project, and refer the following to the Common Council for action. A, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute an agreement with Stewart Mechanical Services, Inc. for the Rhoton Middle School portable air conditioning and electrical upgrade Phase 2 project for a total not to exceed $394,000. Count noted. B, authorize the MPS Facilities Department to issue change orders in this contract for a total of $39,400. Count noted. Do you have a motion? Mr. Hooverman moves it. Okay, is this you, Bill?
Yes, I'll speak to this. So part of our continuing efforts to air conditioning the district, part 2 or phase 2 of Rhoton has come up. And we solicited bids to do the interior classrooms. Last summer, we completed the exterior classrooms. We put this out to bid. We looked at Stewart Mechanical, who we've used many times in the past before. They were the lowest of costs. And we conducted a scope of the bid this afternoon together with the city's purchasing department. We are all aligned on that, and we want to make the recommendation to go with Stewart. With regard to Ms. Lauricella's questions, while we would like to have a white roof, the roof at Rowton is not that old, and we're not there yet. That would be a major capital improvement. The windows have been replaced about 10 years ago to a window that is allows less UV rays in. So they are up to date and they are double pane glass. And window treatments have been applied to the school roughly 5 years ago. So we are taking into account some other means to keep the sun out, but at the same time, we do need to properly condition this school and all schools, and that's why phase 2 is in front of you today at Rowton.
All right, thank you. Any questions, discussion? All right, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. Mr. Hooverman,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Keegan,
Yes.
Mr. Burnett,
Aye.
Mr. Roberts,
Aye.
Mr. Sacchinelli,
Aye.
and I also vote aye, so it's unanimous. Thank you. The next item, review bids for district-wide oil tank replacement project and refer the following to Common Council for action. A, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute an agreement with Salamone and Associates PC for the Norwalk Public Schools oil tank replacement project for a total not to exceed $106,670, account noted. B, authorize the NPS Facilities Department to issue change orders on this contract for a total of $10,700, account noted. There a motion?
I'll move that.
Who was that?
Nick.
Nick?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Bill, is this you again? And if you can
Yes.
tell us about what schools too, and what tanks are still left in the ground.
Okay, so we have, the district has a total of 15 underground oil storage tanks, or fuel storage tanks. 11 of them were installed in 1990. And 30 years later, here we are in 2020, we are mandated to have them replaced due to end of useful life. So 11 of the 15 we are in front of you today, which we hope to start removing. 2 of the 11 will be removed totally, and a new tank would not go in place of it, since those 2 schools were converted to gas. The remaining 9 will be replaced with above ground tanks, as opposed to putting them back in the ground. Above ground tanks has been a policy that the city has been using over the years, non-Board of Ed buildings, whenever there is a need to replace an underground storage tank. These tanks, as I said, are 30 years old. We looked at the 2 bids that came back. Salamone Associates have vast experience across the state of Connecticut with replace or design services for underground storage tank replacements. They were much lower cost than their competitor and have much more experience. Our dialogue with them has proven to us that they are the company to go with. And we will start this project while the schools are in process, because it is an outdoor project and it may last, over 12 months. Mr. Chairman, I know you asked last time, have we checked with Eversource to see if these schools can be converted to gas? We have checked. The answer is no. However, there was, in the past 12 months, over at Ponus, there was an underground storage tank that was removed and replaced by gas, since they were able to get a gas line to Hunter's Lane. That's not part of this program. However, we did check with Eversource, and the oil will remain for the time being.
Okay, thank you. 2 questions for you. One, are you aware of any leakage from any of these tanks?
We are not aware of any leakage, but part of the process is to test the leakage.
Okay. And the other thing is, so you said you're removing 11 of 15. So what happens to
Yes.
the other 4, if that's right?
Oh, I'm sorry. Their due dates that'll be coming in front of you in the next 2 years, the remaining 4 tanks.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any further questions or discussion? Greg?
Yes, Greg Burnett, the question I have is, Eversource said no. What was the reason for no?
Simply can't get gas to certain areas of town. For instance, at Cranberry, I mean, they used a figure of $1 million to get it under the Merritt Parkway up to that town, up to that area of Norwalk, and all of the other schools. They have said that the Board of Ed has contacted or Yankee Gas at the time, now Eversource, over the years, and there hasn't been any reason or any demand to convert certain areas of town to gas. And that's the reason why the tanks are at the 30-year end of life. There is no future plans or immediate plans with Eversource. We have to get them out of the ground. We need to put them above.
Just a quick follow-up question. You mentioned Cranberry. I mean, we're going to be breaking ground and doing construction there and renovation at Jefferson. There's no possibility of making the conversion as we're doing new construction or major renovation at those schools?
Let me answer that question. Jefferson, in fact, I was communicating with Yankee Gas, I'm still saying Yankee Gas, Eversource, as of yesterday. We are getting pricing from them to bring gas to Jefferson. So it's part of our energy plan, because in order to run mechanical system more efficiently, oil does not provide the opportunity. The maximum efficiency from oil is probably 85%, 86% is probably the most. With gas, you can get up to, because we use the exhaust and everything, you can go up to about 95% efficiency of the system. So for energy purposes, regardless of environmental benefits, we are going to gas with Jefferson. Jefferson, as you know, right now is electric. So Cranberry is a different story, because we built a new building. We would like to use gas, but the cost of getting there is never going to pay back, because you got to go underneath where you hang the pipe underneath the highway. I mean, underneath the overpath and stuff like that. So it's a long way to get gas there. And then when Eversource look at an account, they don't look at neighborhood benefit. They got to appraise the cost of the installation based on that one facility. So we have to absorb all the costs, and even though their future benefit for homeowners, it's very, they don't attribute the cost of this project onto potential future customers. And also up that way, it's a AA, AAA residence zone. The number of residents so far apart, they don't get enough accounts, because the lots are much bigger. So as far as what we're doing at Cranberry right now, we're looking at oil.
Hey, Greg, if I could, I mean, I know we've had some constituents who called me about trying to get gas lines put in, but right now with the, oil's, I think, cheaper there's not as much of an incentive for Eversource to put it out, but that way, less people are willing to make their expenditures. But if we are where we are with them, it's out of our control. Any further discussion?
Yeah, so we're removing the tank and replacing it at Cranberry. Are we orienting the above ground tank in such a way as to not interfere with the construction, so we don't have to move it a second time?
Absolutely. The plans for Cranberry would be to a new school, but the existing gym would remain. This current tank is sitting right outside the gym. So the answer is yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Mr. Huberman?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Keegan?
Yes.
Mr. Burnett?
Aye.
Mr. Roberts?
Aye.
Ms. Antonelli?
Aye.
And I also vote aye, so it's unanimous. Thank you, Bill. I think that's it for you. Alan, school construction projects, first item projects update. Don't forget you want to be done by 9.
All right. Poland is still going very well. We really don't have any issue. If you ever go there, I mean, you have interest. Oh, actually, maybe for August meeting. I'm not sure we can meet there, but anyway, it's probably good to get a tour. It's the existing building is pretty much ripped up right now. All seeing exposed conduit everywhere, exposed plumbing, everything else. But we are on schedule to finish on schedule. So everything is good, and we are working on the furniture that we are able to purchase up, expecting delivery. The library may be a little bit late, but again, we find an alternative way to meet that open day requirements. So, and at the same time, we're working on Jefferson in terms of they are packed and pretty much packed, and we got to schedule when we're going to move their the boxes over to the lower school. So everything everything is good. And also the budget, we have about $1 million left at this point. So there's still some change order, but nothing major coming through. It's just like, 10,000 here, 15,000 here, 5,000, whatever. So they are minor. And some of the additional thing that we end up doing, again, I think I said last month, it's we actually replacing the hallway floor and second floor because all the tiles are popping up. Although we didn't include it as an original bid package, it's something we really need to do. Otherwise, we finish, we'll have to go in and do repair work. So it didn't make sense. We are doing that, and we are spending $15,000, I think about $15,000 to repair the existing lockers because some of the push in, some of the door doesn't work and stuff. So we are doing that, and that's scheduled to happen probably, I think it was first week of August. And we also, the 4 multi-store bathrooms, we are generally speaking completely replacing the fixtures, the sink, partitions, and we're repainting and new lighting fixtures. So all the 4 bathrooms are going to be generally speaking new. So those are things we are able to accomplish. And then again, we still have some money left remaining. So that's with bonus. Jefferson again.
Alan, before you go on, so is 2 things. One, why is the library going to be late? Is it furniture arrival? What?
Yeah, it's a manufacturing issue. I don't know all the detail. So when we order the equipment, so delivery date, it's put up to, I think it's September, the first 2 weeks of September.
Okay. And the second thing is
all the furniture. I think related to shelving. I think that was the item that was late.
all right. And the second thing is it $1 million left after those projects you just mentioned?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks. David, are you trying to ask something? Okay, so go ahead, Alan. Sorry, I cut you off.
All right. So Jefferson, again, we are doing pretty well. We went through planning commission for 8-24 review approval earlier in June, middle of June. And also I went to zoning commission for special permit, and there was a lot of support from the zoning commissioners, and we scheduled public hearing for July. So we're gonna have public hearing, and then after that, assuming that we got approval, that ends the zoning process for us. And I think later part of July, we're going up to the state to show them our latest cost estimates and design, so that we can move forward. So then we move forward with construction documents. And also, I think it was last week. Typically, I submit the project to the Board of Education Facility Committee for review once. For this project, I resubmitted, not for approval, just for the information, because there's some question about certain thing when we went for approval the first time. So they saw it for the second time for this project. So everything lined up pretty well. Again, we are after the state approval, we go finish the design drawings, construction drawings, and then we got to bid in probably like late December, January, probably be January, because people don't bid on December. And construction will start probably February or early March. So that's our schedule. The construction is about 14 months or so. So we finished the 2022, I think it's April or so. So there's some safety space kind of thing. And then Jefferson will move back in either the summer or the fall semester.
Greg, Mr. Burnett had a question, I think.
Yes, Greg Burnett. Alan, at one point there was discussion that all of the students in Jefferson could not fit in Ponus. Is that still the case? And if there is, if there's more students moving from Jefferson into Ponus that need to go somewhere else, is there a plan as to where they're going to go?
That was, I would say, about 2 months ago. There was probably maybe 3 months ago. There was about 3 months ago. There was a lot of discussion about the number of Jefferson kids going to Ponus, and we have potential need portable classrooms. And since then, we have many meetings. I would say at least 3 meetings, and Board of Ed is able to manage the enrollment. And we provided some. There's like a existing auxiliary gym. We are putting a temporary dividing wall in it, so that we can have 2 classrooms. And the way we resolve, I don't know the actual number of kids and where they're going to be and everything else. But at the same time, we reach a resolution that we are able to accommodate all the kids from Jefferson in there. And there was and the actual number we won't know the actual number until the end of summer. So there was a little contingency plan also in case it go up by 10 kids or whatever may be kind of thing, that we can absorb a little bit more by using one of the multi-purpose room differently. We don't want to because the multi-purpose room is used for pre-K. No, it's no pre-K, K and first graders, so they don't use the gym there's no gym classes for them. Well, when their gym classes would be held in the multi-purpose room instead of the gym. So anyway, so there's a backup strategy in case the summertime there's more enrollment comes in, but not too many. I mean, if I think we could accommodate like 10 or 15 kids more if we have to, but then it requires to do some more changes. So generally speaking, we are good.
So we're not moving portables, and
We're not
is
building.
that correct? Is that
Yeah.
correct? We're not moving portables?
Right, we're not moving portables.
Good.
And
And
it's like $300,000-$400,000. So it's not.
good. And secondly, you mentioned a couple of months ago, I mean, that thinking and plan was pre COVID plan to move back in that just came out on Monday. So are they re-looking at what they were thinking 2 months ago based upon the new guidelines for the fall?
I can't answer that question.
Okay.
Because I think that issue is a system-wide issue, right? I mean, apply to all the schools. So I don't know what the strategy is. I mean, it just.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just saying that the thinking that they had to address the number of students moving into Jefferson, that equation has now changed as a result of the guidelines that have come out Monday for opening in the fall. And I hope they look at that because we might be back into a space problem.
Yeah, this is
Tom. Oh, Tom is still there. I didn't know you.
Yeah, I'm still here. I don't, it is something the district obviously is looking at. The new state that guidelines just came out. So the district is, examining those. There's a committee that is being formed to develop opening plans. And obviously any plans that we do have are going to have to comply with the state guidelines. In the meantime, we have a summer school program that is operating under a different set of guidelines, which are actually quite a bit more strict than the new guidelines that came out for the fall opening, the guidelines that came out on Monday. So it's very much a changing landscape, and seems every week, there's a different set of guidance that we've got to get up to speed on. But certainly, we're going to have to comply with whatever guidelines are out there. But I think it's fortunate that we didn't, we were able to come up with some alternatives to having to put portables at Ponus. So we moved some students from the middle school grades. We moved 16 students over to Roten and another 16 students over to Nathan Hale to sort of relieve some of the pressure on the middle school there. We didn't bring the pre-K program that was at Jefferson over to Ponus, and then made those other changes that Alan talked about in terms of a temporary wall to create the space needed. So we think that we've got the space we need for next year at Jefferson.
Alan, this is David. The portable classrooms right now that are at Jefferson, and I know the discussion was possibly moving them. Now we're not going to move them. Is there any life left in those? Can we salvage them, or are we just they're just
going to be demolished?
Okay, thank you.
Any further project updates, Alan? Just want to keep things moving. Alan?
No, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the remaining school, we submitted a grant application to the state for the narrow mix school project, as well as for what's the other Cranberry project. So they were submitted by June 30th, which is yesterday. We submitted about a week and a half ago. That's all taken care of. And as we talked about last month, Norwalk High School, we didn't submit it yet because we're waiting for the state special legislature to get approval before we and they would set a separate date for the deadline for submission. So, but we're ready for it. We have all the local approval and funding in place for our share.
Okay.
So, generally speaking, that's about it. And I didn't show the report because I'll probably send it out next week to everybody. We typically do a monthly report, so I'll issue that to you next week.
Okay, anybody have any questions on this?
Tom, would it be appropriate, Greg Burnett, would it be appropriate to ask about the new South Norwalk School? Any update on that?
I don't think there is any update, but ask away. I mean, Alan?
There's no. I don't want to go into too much, but I'm very actively working on it, and we are continuing to look at alternative sites. It's a real estate issue, so I don't want to talk about it too much. But at the same time, we are. I think maybe if I think give me about 3 weeks, I may have some better ideas, and if the timing is appropriate, I would talk to Councilman Livingston. We would schedule a executive session to review with the committee, because it's just sensitive when we talk about potential people's property. So and also our ability to negotiate with potential property owner that we want to acquire property from. So again, give me about 2 to 3 weeks. There's something I'm working on, and then assuming those results come back and stuff, and if timing it works out, I will talk to Tom to see whether we can do this executive session too.
Yeah, we'll try and do it if we can next month. Okay, let's keep moving unless there's other questions on the projects. All right, let's go to Jefferson School. Review bid results for moving services for Jefferson School and refer the following to the Common Council for action. A, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute an agreement with Precision Placement LLC for the Jefferson Elementary School renovation and improvement project for a total not to exceed $55,230. Account noted. B, authorize the Land Use and Building Management Committee to issue change orders on contract for total not to exceed $5,500. Have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Alan, this is pretty straightforward, but one question I had reading the memo was it said you're moving in the summer and fall.
Yeah,
and in the summer and fall or something like that. It seemed like.
Yeah, actually, yeah. What happens is this: we have to move Jefferson into Polnett. That's pretty obvious, right? So what happens? Jefferson is gonna be empty, right? But at the same time is that we gotta move all the old furniture out. So that's another move. But there's no teachers and teacher stuff involved. We have to move the furniture out in order to do construction. So that's the second move. So so anticipate that we have also a discussion potential do an early bid package to be ahead of the game a little bit, which include demolition and remediation. So that's what we're working on. So we need a second move in the fall, generally speaking.
Okay. Any other questions and discussion? Hearing none, I'll put the matter to a vote. Mr. Rubenman?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Keegan?
Yes.
Mr. Burnett?
Aye.
Mr. Roberts?
Aye.
Mr. Sacchinelli?
Aye.
And I also vote aye, so it's unanimous. Okay. Next item, review request to increase contract allowance with Meyer to provide moving services for Ponus School. Then refer the following to Common Council for action. Authorize the Office of Building Management to issue change orders on contract with William B. Meyer, Inc. for moving services for the Ponus Ridge School Addition and Alterations Project for a total not to exceed $20,000. Account noted. Do you have a motion?
I'll move that.
Ms. Smith, thank you. Alan, anything?
No, we did not. When we first sent this for approval, we did not have a contingency amount set up. So we just approved 125,000, and as it turned out, we will be exceeding that for the upcoming summer move. So so I'm asking to increase provide contingent $20,000, and it's all based on unit price. How many movers we have, and how many boxes and all that other stuff. So it's not to exceed $20,000.
Okay. Any comments, questions? Hearing none, I'll put it to a vote. Mr. Huberman?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Keegan?
Yes.
Mr. Burnett?
Aye.
Mr. Roberts?
Aye.
Mr. Sacchinelli?
Aye.
And I also vote aye, so it's unanimous. Okay, next item, designate representatives from this committee to participate in the school advisory committees for the Cranberry School and Merrimack School improvement projects. As you guys know, with the elimination of the NFCC, we now have, we are now the building committee for the school projects. And one of the things we do or can do is establish building committees. So Alan, you want to talk about this a little more, or you're looking
No,
for?
it's pretty straight. I need to, we anticipate that we're going to be doing interviews and things like that with architects and construction manager in the next couple of months. We're preparing the RFP for architects and as right now. So we're looking to probably issue it in probably about a couple of weeks. So as this project started, I'm just doing the planning background stuff and getting the building committee together. And the first step was just get some council member of this committee to get involved in it. There are some daytime meeting associated with it, with being on the committee, because usually we interview architects and stuff during the daytime. So it's not that much time. I mean, in the initial phases, it's like we do probably like one meeting for an hour, and then we do interviews. Probably take a little time. So that's probably like 4 hours, another meeting. And then, so that's about it. And then at the same time, as the project move forward, there will be probably a monthly meeting or something like that. So again, that's usually we do about 3:30 for those meetings. The reason being the school ends, there's the teacher, parents involved, so that it's right after school and people, and then when the parents pick up the kids and teachers finishing up or principal, then we get together around 3:30 or something like that.
Yeah.
So,
I've done this a lot in the past, but I know some of you have particular interest in these building projects like David. So I want to, the people go where they want to go.
You're looking for volunteers?
Yeah, David, you wanted to do Merrimack?
Well, I'm happy to do Merrimack because I sat on that SGC when my son was there, and I know this was something we had started sort of rolling that SGC, and I wouldn't mind sitting on
That makes a lot of sense to me.
I mean, Tom, Greg?
Yeah.
How many council members are you looking for these committees?
Alan, I mean, just one or two, I think, right, Alan?
Yeah, minimum one. I gotta look at it one more time. The reason being is that it's actually one member of the land use committee. I gotta look at the ordinance. I think the ordinance.
No, Alan, we can do what we want.
Oh, you want to do one? Then one is fine.
Well, I mean, I was going to participate in the Cranberry one as a new project, but I don't, others can do it as well.
Well, if you're looking for a second at Merrimack, I'll volunteer for that. I was on the building committee for the extension of the new classrooms.
Well, that'd be great then. Yeah, that'd be great.
When they did that project.
Okay.
Can I just ask what the time frame is? Because I'm available right now during the day, but once school rolls around, I'm not available during the day, but I am after 3:30.
Right. Interview.
Interviews may be tough, like the
interview is 4 hours. It's hard to schedule it starts at 4 o'clock kind of thing to end up
Right,
like.
so that's not something that's going to happen over the next couple months.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we haven't issued the RFP yet. By the time we issue it, by the time the proposal come back, we have to do a short listing. It probably takes at least a month and a half. That would be in middle of August. So by the time we interview, it would be.
I'm back to work. Yeah. Okay.
This may not work.
So for Merrimack, we'll have Mr. Burnett, Mr. Hooverman. I will do Cranberry. If anybody else joins me, that's great. If you don't, that's fine too. And you can just think about it if you want. Okay, let's keep moving. And again, come back to me if you want, or Alan, if you want something changes.
Yeah.
Okay, next item, excuse me, is the Maritime Aquarium. Review recommendation for an amendment to the ONG, that's AP Constructions Agreement for the Maritime Aquarium Functional Replacement Project, and refer the following to the Common Council for approval. Authorize the Mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute an amendment to the ONG Industries AP Construction TMA, a joint venture agreement for the Norwalk Maritime Aquarium Functional Replacement Project, to provide additional staff support for a total not to exceed $100,000, and to extend the completion date for the 4D Theater to January 15, 2021, and the seal tank to March 19, 2021. Funds are available from the Maritime Aquarium State Functional Replacement account number noted. Have a motion?
I'll move that. Greg
Burnett,
Burnett.
thank you. Alan?
Yeah, I have you probably know if you have opportunity. maybe you can read the backup memo I have in the package. It's kind of extensive. Maritime Aquarium for the last, I've been working with the city for 38 years. This is probably the most difficult project I ever encountered for many reasons, and I listed them in my backup memo. There are many struggles that we face daily, weekly, monthly, and also getting the project out of the ground is extremely difficult. It is an old building, industrial site, foundation that we don't know. We're going down, digging down to seal tank, and it's actually below flood elevation. So like right now, we're digging water. This day is very high tide, so middle of the day, there's plenty of water in those trenches. I mean, in fact, that we couldn't dig anymore during the high tide. So many different things. The trade contractor, generally speaking, all our project got to bid, and low bid contractors, some good, some are not so good, and all of these things adds up to compound number of issues. We as a team, the city, Maritime Aquarium, and the contractor, we meet every week, maybe sometimes twice a week. We work on this issue. We are working together to come up with the best solution we have for all our problems. There are a lot of struggle in terms of discussion too. So it's not like, we get together, everything great. It gets very aggressive sometimes, but we are doing what we have to do to push this project along. And not to blame things on like COVID-19, but it does create a problem for us on this project. So especially for steel delivery, we were scheduled originally, I think I forgot what the date is, as I mentioned in my memo, that was scheduled for, I think it's April or something, yeah, April 20 something, I think it was. And the steel didn't get delivered to June 6th, I believe, it's to June 10th or something like that. So just for steel, it's a month and a half late. So among all these issues, we sat down. I had a pre-meeting with the owner side, which consists of state, Maritime Aquarium, and myself, and the mayor, Alicia King. We actually talk about what we should do or don't do, and the benefits, the pros and cons, the costs, and everything else. So we have a pre-meeting, and then second meeting, we sat down with APO&G and went through all the rights and wrongs and who's at fault and everything else. But it is the spirit of the team and of everybody that we're not here to, this project is going to be late, but at the same time, we're not here to go to court or anything. We are here to continue to resolve this problem. We're not fighting against each other. We actually work together to continue to solve this problem to the best of our ability to deliver the projects. So it's a positive thing. There's going to be delay. The dates are specified. The state has raised some concern about different things, and I'm going to continue to address them with James Mason from the state DOT. But at the same time, is that I'm putting forth this proposed amendment. It really reset the clock. So we're not arguing with the construction manager or the trade contractor, the supplier that, well, you delay 3 days here, there's 4 days here, and add up, blah, 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 you responsible for it. Delay, everybody has a little piece of it. The construction manager, the trade contractor, the supplier, the architect, the engineers, the Maritime Aquarium, the site conditions, and all of that have a piece of every item. So this is an effort, a strong effort to put all that aside and work together to do our best to come to the best ability to come up with a date. And this is the date. And by resetting this clock, we're not going backward. We're looking forward. So what that means is that we are not going to, the city is not going to complain about, well, you lost 2 days here, you'll respond for that, and then the contractor is not going to say, well, due to COVID-19, you owe us a month and a half time kind of extension. So we kind of just brush over everything, say, look, we all understand that many reasons this happens, and we sit down together and conclude that we're going to move forward together, and this is the package. The CM had, because the number of issue, they spent about $160,000 for additional staff time. I agree, and well, generally, we sat down, agreed, compromise, and come down to $100,000 for the additional staff that the city will contribute.
Well, Alan, if I could stop you there, it's state money, right? So when you say the city,
all state money, right? But that's why the state is involved, but regardless whether it's state money or our money, it's the same philosophy and strategy here. And then on the other end, because typically when you do extension of time, there's also the construction manager had additional staff time for 3 months. So the construction manager agreed to absorb that cost for 3 months of staffing costs. So it is give and take on both sides. And from moving forward, there's no guarantees in life in a sense, but at the same time is that we all committed to continue to deliver this project and push the schedule. So can I guarantee that after this amendment is done, there will not be another delay? I can't, because something making it up here. Another round COVID-19, there's another issue. And also the other piece too, it's like when you get to the theater is pretty good shape in terms of our ability to meet the schedule, the revised schedule is pretty good. The steel tank is continuing to be difficult because it is such a specialty item with trade specialty contractors and design team. That process is still going to be difficult. So again, all I can promise to the community and city is that I'm still keeping the group together, the team together, so that there's no fighting and potentially going to court kind of stuff, which will further delay the projects, right? But it is still the cooperative effort to deliver this project. And again, these are scheduled in front of us, and continue to push for it and work with state and maritime aquarium. Maritime aquarium is struggling, right? It's because it's they haven't been open for these months, and at the same time, they're looking forward to 4D theater. Hopefully, that we can open in before Christmas because of the new exhibit. So we're going to be a great attraction. So, but we are still trying our best to meet their needs. But right now, I don't want to make false promises that we can get there. So the day is for January, I think January 15, I think it is. But we are still working. In fact, today we have a meeting today, and we talked about how we can continue to shorten the schedule and try to overlap some of the tasks and stuff to push it faster, kind of thing. So we are working very hard to do everything we can. Hope you can support this. Thank you.
Any questions, comments? Okay, let me ask for a vote. Mr. Hulaman,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Yes, sorry.
Mr. Keegan,
Yes.
Mr. Burnett,
Aye.
Mr. Sacchinelli,
Aye.
and I also vote yes, so unanimous. Okay, Alan, miscellaneous, there's nothing, right?
Nothing.
Do I have a motion? Anyone? Ms. Smith, motion to, any objections? Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you guys very
Thank you
much.
very much.
Thank you,
Thank
Alan.
Everybody.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Good night.